Hi team, Aces up here for PokerNerve. The important skill of donk betting is one of those tactics that is easy to mess up if you aren't paying attention to the effective stack size. So this short tutorial, I'll discuss how to donk bet correctly with a shorter stack. So here we are on a 762 rainbow board with the 10 deuce. And this time we have M7 stacks that we've started the hand with. So just under 20 BB. We know that this is a flop that we generally wouldn't want to do a lot of donking on when we're deep, especially. There's not really that many strong combos that the big blind can have. 6-7 sets. Sevens is just 50% of the time because we're 3-betting sometimes. So it's really just half the time we have a set of sevens, which is only really, when you think about it, 1.5 combos. 3 combos of sixes, 3 combos of twos. And then we do have all the 6-7s. Yeah, we do. All 6-7 suited, we'd actually 3-bet pre-flop some percentage. This is a Munker range, remember. But yeah, a bunch of 6-7 combos for 2 pair and some 6 deuce suited and some 7 deuce suited. But yeah, the thing is that we just don't really have that many strong hands. So naturally, if we look at this in PO when we have a deeper stack, here is the original stack size that we had. And we can see here in the browser that we will not be doing that much donking. Only around 11% of the time we'll be donking. Now, if we compare that to this scenario here, where we have the shorter stack, you can see here that we are actually donking now a lot. In fact, it's a huge increase, isn't it? Now that we only have the under 20 BB stack, M7-ish, we're actually donking 40% of the time and using, as I spoke about, as we get shorter, a big size. So we just want to keep the process as simple as possible. And you can see that 10 deuce is actually a combo that will quite often just go for this big size here. So we go ahead and do that. We go for the 2/3 rather than small bet size. Here you can see we can actually just bet and our opponent shoved on us. And now we can just call it off. EV lost 0, it's the correct play. You can see that just betting big and then our opponent, who in this instance actually had ace queen, we actually had the best hand. Their correct response is just to shove. Sorry, it's actually to call the majority of the time. 65% of the time they just call. But they can actually just shove at a frequency. And that's the option that they chose this time. They will actually sometimes fold too. So it's an interesting mix there. Calling most often and then folding a decent percentage, but just jamming around 11% of the time, which they did this time. And we just call it off. Pure call 100% there once we get shoved on. And so that is interesting difference in the stack size that we spoke about. That pattern again about using the bigger size, and particularly here on this 762 board. Just going for that large size, really with, sometimes with a pair, sometimes checking. If we do check and our opponent bets small, you can see that basically any pair is just, most of the time pairs are ripping it in. We will mix in some calls, but you can see lots of 6x, 7x, and even the deuce x just getting it in as a check jam. Occasionally check calling, but against the bigger sizes, often just getting it in with a pair or a straight draw. But mixing as well with just using a lot of donk bets. So quite a mix here in the strategies. Again, you have to be a little bit careful. If you start donking too often, every time you hit a pair, I'm just going to donk. Then, of course, your opponent can just bet small whenever you check and you'll just be giving up a ton. So it's very mixed between donking and check shoving. You can see here. And mixing in some calls as well. And, of course, you want to be able to sometimes when it goes check, check, also have some bets on the turn. See, we still have some 7x and 6x here. So each part of the game tree, it's quite mixed, it's balanced, and so this is a good strategy to use. Of course, you want to adjust to your opponent. If you think that they're going to overfold to a big bet on the flop, you can see here that when we do opt for that big bet, that they're supposed to continue with, again, lots of high card combinations, even King 10 here, King Jack is folding most of the time. Offsuit King Queen. It's the most of the time he's got the backdoor flush here. Obviously on this rainbow board, there's 3 lots of backdoor flushes if they have a suited hand. It's going to continue. But if you think your opponent is going to fold Jack Queen with a backdoor flush, or even here you can see the hearts are continuing 3/4 of the time, then this might be an even more profitable play because you have the benefit of just getting your opponent to give up with a lot of hands that they should be continuing with, that they might have checked back the flop anyway, and then have a chance to realize their equity on a later street. Or maybe a high card comes, maybe they do have the Jack Queen and then the King comes or the Ace or whatever, and they get to bluff you, or the turn goes check check as well, and they get to realize their equity again and get to the the river when you had a pair. So yeah, just bear all of that in mind and adjust accordingly. And for those of you thinking, what? Just bet a pair and call off M7? I would just keep in mind M7 is fairly short and we are against a fairly wide range. Take a look at this range here and we can see that when we do flop a pair on that 7-6 deuce board, it's going to be the best hand a lot of the time. It's going to have pretty good equity. If your opponent is then shoving over the top with a very tight range, only over pairs and top pair and that sort of stuff, yeah, then of course it becomes a little bit more questionable if they're only raising with a very, very tight range. But remember that we're looking at GTO solutions here, and they shouldn't just really have those over pairs and top pair type of hands that shove and everything else just calling. They should be mixing it in. And as we saw, that was the case where last time it was ace queen off and we actually did have the best hand with 10 deuce. They should have some of those hands that are just shoving. And I think most opponents will. Here again, we've got the ace 5. And again, we just got that shorter stack size. So we're okay just some of the time here. Just going ahead and betting really big. And you can see here that by the turn now, we have an SPR already under 1. We've got the ace high with an up and down. I'm just going to go ahead and shove the rest of the chips in here. And our opponent this time had queen 6. Now, we've played the hand okay, but definitely not the highest frequency option. You can see here that checking is still the highest frequency option 70% of the time. But if we are going to donk, using the smaller size sometimes, but yeah, going with that big size and then sometimes just shoving the turn. A little bit less of a frequency here since we have a few different options. And if we actually replay the hand, so we're going to just check this time and we can see that our opponent has checked back. Okay, and on the turn we could probably lead at some frequency and maybe go with the little bit larger size here on the turn. That size again was 75%. So we go with a 3/4 bet, I think, here and put a little bit of pressure on some of those high card hands that opponent can have. We're still pushing a little bit of equity here. I mean, we could sometimes have the best hand, but we also have that straight draw on the ace high. I'm going to check again. And our opponent, what do? They check back, so we get to the river. I think this is probably a spot where we could check, since we will have the best hand sometimes. And our opponent has bet. So I think mixing here between fold, call, and raise is probably the way to go. I think most of the time we probably actually want to just call. Because remember we said that our opponent should be careful on this flop texture, especially in this instance where we have a pretty short stack that we can just shove when they bet. And that should force them to do a fair bit of checking. And so that being the case, when they get to the river in this fashion, sometimes they will just have hands that probably gave up, like Jack Queen, that now decide, okay, I better bluff just in case my opponent has ace high or king high. Might be able to get some folds. And so, or worse. And so I think that being the case, we probably do want to call at a reasonable frequency. You can see here that the best action was actually to call. And so the line that we've taken, remember we can bet around a third of the time on the flop with a donk, going for that largest size most of the time, or we can check. We checked and opponent check back. Checking turn is what the solver will do over half the time, but it will do a lot of betting. Remember we said that sort of largest bet size of 3/4 pot was something we considered, but we did check. And then checking on the river, and after we see a bet, calling is slightly the preferred play over folding, quite a close EV between them. And there is actually a very low frequency of something I mentioned, which is going for the jam. But yeah, it's not a very credible line when you go check, 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 shove in the eyes of most opponents and in the eyes of Mr. GTO as well. They're only using it at a pretty low frequency. So you got to be careful with that one. But yeah, the call was fine. Just have a look at one more hand here. and see what we can see with these shorter stacks. So this is an interesting one again, isn't it? Where we've got the 2 overs, backdoor flush, gut shot. I think probably just check shoving here is pretty good as well. But again, maybe just going for that larger bet. Bang, going to go and take that option. And we just get a fold. How nice is that? Just a donk out. Our opponent had ace queen, and we just go ahead and donk, and we can see here that that is the option that the solver would use here 80% of the time, in fact. Heavily favoring the donk with this gut shot, backdoor flush. And we just got a fold and took it down straight away and added quite a nice amount to our stack since we only started this hand with M7. And if we do take a look again, just in PO here, just a quick look. I know we did look at this texture before, but you can just see that the 9-10 here suited here, donking the majority of the time. And yeah, once that is the case, our opponent is just really in quite a tough spot, aren't they, when we have the stack size? So definitely a play that you want to incorporate into your game. If we did happen to check and they bet, we have the 9-10 suited, we can of course then just shove it and just get it in. So if you do think your opponent is just going to see bet 100% and just say, oh, it's only the big line, I'm just going to bet, then you can go ahead and capitalize on dead money that they might put in the pot and play the hand that way. So you do want to adjust based on your opponent, of course, as we've spoken about, take the exploitative lines, but just keep in mind how liberally that we can actually be just getting it in these flops, because I think it is a situation where a lot of opponents play a little bit too tightly, and here perhaps just call a small bet, or don't bluff later, or just never donk, and therefore often find themselves missing out on picking up a lot of chips. So we can see some really significant shifts. Not too surprising. We know that we have to adjust according to stack size. It's a huge part of the game, but good to see some specific examples there when it relates to donk betting and the correct approach to take.
So I hope you picked something up from this video to help you improve your donk betting. If so, drop us a like and click the notification bell too, so you don't miss out on the next video. This was Aces Up for Poker Nerve. See you then. Want to take your game to the next level? Make sure you check out our MTT poker course. Thanks for watching.